So first of all, the session is not about engineering. It's not about technical knowledge or know-how, or not another library based on Node.js. But I go above and beyond engineering. The science of how people at workplace behave is the next level that we're trying to preach people, so that people understand why people at work do certain things and why they don't do certain things. If you look at most of our responsibilities as leads, all of you are at a lead or being a lead at one point of time. You really reflect yourself what would have been the most difficult things, or what would have been the most important piece in my job. Definitely that would have been something, finding the right person to do the right job. At any level, that matters a lot. Finding the right person to do the right job means a lot. You may get a person who's highly good in IQ, but if that person does not like the job, that's not going to be successful. We all have experienced. There are certain jobs, regardless of the skill or the talent of the individual, if the person does not like the job, like individuals, bringing the correct talent into the organization is a very, very important thing. And as you go further in your career, that becomes key responsibility of yours. Bringing right people to the right places and wonders can happen. And you have seen that with multiple teams. Having the right people at the right time made a big difference. So that's a fact we all agree, bringing the right person to the right job. And in the right person for the right job. So this is more of a study that is done in 1970s from a psychological perspective. How do we sort of find the right person for the right job by looking at some of the variables that we usually don't question in a selection process. Before we start, I have not structured this in a very methodical fashion where people ask you information from multiple sources and put you into a situation where you have questions. And as we go through this session, you might find answers, or at the end of this session, you might have to ask that question and get your answer. So, having agreed to the fact that recruiting the correct talent, the right talent, is utmost important to get the job done, let's look at how do we select people for the job. And of course, the obvious mechanism right now what we have is an interview. There's an interview. You get a person to come for an interview, talk to that person, which is a very small window, and then you build a perception about the individual within that period of time, and then you make a judgment. Technically, which is a lot of guesswork. Your past experience, what you know about this person, they all come to play. However, this study is about, is there a science behind it? Can we put it to a framework so that you follow that framework? Do interviews help companies to select best person for the job? What do you guys think? If not, what are the other mechanisms? You know, the biggest problem for most of our engineers when they become senior engineers and tech leads, if you ask them to interview someone and provide feedback, they're very scared to provide that feedback. They always go for the safe option of the middle part, right? Good, which is it's a much safe option. When you rated someone in the middle, that person could be not so good or very good, but you are still safe. That's because there is no scientific framework to evaluate a person right and give you a according to the studies. Yes, interviews are the most proven way of hiring people. Think of it this way. Even a very good friend of yours might recommend a person to you. What is the possibility of you hiring that individual without having an interview? That friend might be one of your best friends from your school days. You still talk to the person that your friend has recommended and finalize that. So interview. Do you know this guy? Anyone? People in HR should know this guy. SVP, People Operations at Google. 2 years back, he did an interview with New York Times. And some weird things came out of that interview. And people in the HR domain, there's a lot of buzz about it, and people started talking. I have taken bits and pieces from that interview, and actually it was a technical title. It said, "Big data cannot help to pick good people," something like that, right? So it was saying data analysis cannot do that. Bob is the guy. If you Google him, if you go to YouTube, there's lots of videos. He has run a program called Best Recruiter at Google, where he talks about how they train engineers, engineering leads, or other professionals to hire the best candidate. What kind of parameters are given to them to analyze them. Very interesting program, and we present that, and Google has won that continuously many times. They've been the best recruiter. He says data analysis cannot help. He says we looked at thousands of interviews, and everyone who had done the interviews and what they scored, the score that they given to the candidate, and how that person, the candidate, eventually performed in their job. What was your score at the interview, and how you performed over a period of time. And interestingly, they found zero relationship. People who been marked as very good in the interview might have performed really badly. We have seen that in our work environment. I have hired a lot of people, and yes, I have made mistakes. Probably you have hired a lot of people, and you can't say I have hired only the best in the organization. So it's a hard deal, and that relationship is zero relationship. That's a very strong statement in people who are familiar with data science. Having a zero relationship in anything is a really hard deal. There is some sort of relationship. This is more of a way of speaking from this is coming from head of HR, HR. And he calls it complete random mess. How we conduct interviews at Google, complete random mess at one point. This is 2011. Another finding, we found that brain teasers, the difficult questions that you ask, there are 3 people in a bus going at the speed of 60, what's the age of driver, stop time. But in my opinion, this is the architecture. Do you agree with this? Are brain teasers waste of time? You go to an interview, someone asks you there are 3 candles and 3 buckets of water and how you change a light bulb or something like that. Do you like that kind of? Does that actually measure your ability to perform a job? Well, a structured behavioral interviews where you have a consistent rubric for how you assess people. So it's not about another aspect. It's not about the question itself. It's about when you ask a person a question, based on the answer, what's the value you assign to that individual, so that value can be compared, right? That's consistent value. Compared against multiple people, interviews done by multiple other people. You know what I mean, right? So the same person does not have to do the interview for 50 people. 20 people can do interviews for 50 people, and then you come up with a number which can be comparable, which is also important. This is what we do today. If I ask Dinidhu to do an interview, he's going to make a lot of stuff. Right? Because there's no clear guideline given to him saying this is how you should assess an individual. Is that you have an interview is half an hour to 1 hour window, you make a preference, and most of the time your preference is based on your personality, not based on fit for job. Naturally, we are biased, right? I'm biased to people who look like me, who talk like me, who walk like me. Then I'm biased to people who are from my birth town, who are from my university, who drive same vehicle as mine, or who drive better vehicles than me. Things like that, right? But does any of that variables give you a sense of how to hire the right person for the right job? No. They're actually distractions. Even talking about the university of a person who just graduated, it's a complete distraction. We all know that, but including myself, we know that. We stereotype people from the university and say they are all good, but eventually it turned out to be only a percentage of that is good, and a university which we even haven't heard, a person can do really good in a job. When you try to ask a question, you ask an individual, give me an example of some really complicated thing that you have done and how you did it. And if that person says, really complicated thing, okay, I installed Java, then I downloaded some Java files, then I created a hello world. Very complicated. Moment a person says that, you can assess what's the stage of that. If you did not ask that question, if you ask, do you know Java? Yes, I know Java. Have you installed Java? Yes, I have installed Java. Have you worked with third-party libraries? Yes, I have. Until you ask the question, what was the most complicated thing that you have done in the past using the language Java? Right. So that is where we are going. Most of the time, our interview questions are, have you done this? Have you been involved in a project like this? Yes, yes, yes. Because whoever comes here wants to get hired. So they're going to say what you want to hear. How do you ask a question in a way that they give you an answer that they think is good, which you can assess the interview? We're going to go to a bunch of sample questions and analyze it. Okay, because they can still come up with their own answer. You need to drill it down, you need to cross-check, ask other questions which are deviating from that to validate, things like that. You get two kinds of information. So lateral sales get how they actually interacted in a real world situation, past, and what is candidate sense of complicated. For me, flying a two-seater flight is a complicated thing. Right? It's really complicated. But if someone is interviewing me for a pilot, if I simply say, hey, big dashboard, I know how to switch it on, that's not good enough for them. So they can assess me, ask me, how many flights have you flown and what have you done there? That kind of question. So you need to get these two sense. One is, what have they done? How have they done it? Not on a hypothetical base, but on an actual scenario. And the other one is, what is this guy's capacity of what is his thinking about complexity? Maybe that guy has much more complex, his complexity level must be much higher. So then we need to know that. Some individuals we might have rejected on interviews simply because we don't go to that level. We look at the personality, what do they carry? They don't have like a fancy smartphone, or they might not carry a university certificate. That's a personality level, not the right person. Select the best candidate at an interview. So that's where we are getting at. So I gave you some sense of behavioral interviews without a proper definition. Let's look at some of the definition. By the way, the definition and the behavioral concept is extremely simple. In certain cases, even we have done it without really knowing these theories. Most of the psychological theories are like that. What we have known, what we have tried, we just designed behavioral interviewing technique is based on your past. The most accurate predictor of future performance is past performance in a similar situation. This is the basic. What if you are hiring fresh graduates? So they haven't worked they have worked for a company, they haven't done complicated projects. It's not true. They have done their projects, they have done their group projects, assignments, and they have faced conflicts and situations at the university, at their home. It's about life experience, right? Because the deal of behavioral interview is to figure out what are your strengths based on the areas that we categorize. So let's go a little further and let's understand it. So what I'm trying to say is, this is applicable for fresh grads as well as people who have experience. You still can ask them to relate to something that they have done and talk from that experience that they have. So behavioral interviews is a technique to go to your past and to see how you have performed there to figure out your future. Accurate than traditional interviews, which is only 10%. So what it means, if you have hired 10 people, statistically only one person is 100% fit for the job. 9 other people, Rasik has to deal something. Or maybe not deal about. So the word structured interview was there, right? So I present 2 things. Situational, my actual picture for situational was MacGyver, but I figured most of you don't know what MacGyver is. People who don't know MacGyver? Don't know MacGyver, yeah. So James Bond is a situational guy, right? Based on the situation he is, according to the script. Behavior is something, in an interview, you might not understand the behavior of an individual. In some psychological theory, it says for you to understand an individual, their behavior, very first day you have a perception about an individual. Then as you go along, it changes. After 6 months, the perception what you have about a person is quite solid. Because average person cannot hide things more than 6 months. That is why you organize a file directory system on a computer network, blah blah blah, you get the picture. So let's go to sample behavioral questions. Number 1, all behavioral questions are asked to figure out how good they are on a particular soft skill. Right? Like what is their, so things like analytical skills, IQs, there are other ways of measuring. This is about soft skills. Soft skills is what makes an individual a fit for the organization, and that individual gives you the right kind of performance. The initial question that I put, like, you might hire a person who's high in IQ, but will they like the job? That boils down to soft skills. Liking the job and having the right skills to do that job. So all your behavioral questions, before you ask, you need to figure out what that question means, what that question actually relates to, so that you can come up with it. So if you are looking for an individual, so I have got some basic questions, you can Google it and come up with 1,000 questions. If you are looking for a person to have teamwork, this might be a good question. Talk about a time when you had to work closely with someone whose personality was very different from yours. A university student or a person who has worked. And even we can publish these answers, publish these questions, because there's no one set answer. And you need to have a real life past experience, because then you can ask more questions to dig down and how they handle it. And also you can verify that from other references. Hey, this guy worked in this guy worked while working on a team. How did you handle that? And remember, if a person is being honest, always give that person that credit. So you are not asking about every situation. It's pretty much you can. So as the person who's being interviewed, you can talk about a happy scenario. And I'll also talk, maybe not in this, but probably how to face an interview right. We don't need to do that. Describe a time when you struggle to build a relationship with someone important. How did you eventually overcome that? This is a question. Let's go to another category, time management.
Anjana, question. Since these are life examples, sometimes someone can fool around and not like the real question, like analytical question. So it's hard to find a proper answer for these things. And but I feel it's difficult to select the person.
So the concern is, since these questions people can lie.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where the digging in comes. When I talk to that person, I feel like working for that person. There are cases like that, right? So that person is telling you what they want, what you want to hear. It's a smart person, but unless you understand that situation and step out of that situation and look at it from overall, you get caught. And in real life, you can get caught. Behavioral can't help that. But assuming where your candidate is moderately honest, these techniques will work. And remember, behavioral interview is a part and parcel. It's a part of the big interview process. You have the IQ process, you take referrals, you have other straightforward questions. You can ask them to do something. Above and beyond, you go to this. Right? Behavioral questions are to figure out whether they are more for cultural fit to the organization, from teamwork, from perspective, communication, things like that. So time management is an interesting question. How did you keep everything moving along a timely manner? Describe a long-term project that you managed and how did you do it? Sometimes it's not just possible to get everything done on your to-do list. Tell me about a time your responsibilities got a little overwhelming. What did you do? I actually like this question because this happens to everyone. When you can't achieve 10 things in your bucket, naturally you have to do 8 things. But how do you pick your 8 from 10? Gives me an impression about the individual. If I pick the easy 8, that tells a. Alright, so you get the point. You can map these questions, and I have a bunch of other questions on communication. Introducing that there is something like this which can dig down into what they have done in the past, and based on that, how they express themselves, how they have handled that situation, you can judge that person, you can learn about that person, which matters for an interview, because end of the day, a question like extremely loose supervision, how did you work, and when you worked under very close supervision, how did you behave, things like that, gives you how they perceive their managers, how they look at their supervisors, which is also somewhat important information. Like if you hire a person, technically good fit, but who doesn't want to work in a team, who doesn't want to take instructions from another guy, you're screwed, right, in our setting. So that's quite important. Alright, so that's pretty much the concept. Time to ask questions.